Eel Creek Manor. Supposedly the most haunted site in all of the town of Washer, Illinois. Positioned at the top of a hill, along Eel Creek, the dilapidated Gothic mansion has been the setting for many ghost stories and speculation. The most prevalent being the tale of Henry Mathers. Henry Mathers was an English immigrant who built the mansion in 1864 after moving here from Europe. It was said that he made his wealth off of a booming farm, but the folklore will state that his riches came from the devil himself. Henry Mathers was a rather reclusive individual, not being one to be social in town or host lavish parties for everyone to attend. Though, it is said that he was the host to a number of satanic gatherings that consisted of orgies and blood sacrifices to the gods of the underworld. Whether any of this was true or not, Mathers was found dead in 1889 from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. He took his own life before going to trial for the disappearance of a little girl named Abby McBride. Her bloated corpse was found with a cut throat tied to a wooden post. Ever since, the mansion has sat vacant save for the ghost investigators and psychics that enjoyed a visit a few times each year. My buddies, Daniel Francis and Philip Wallace, had had a certain interest in the house for years. Now that we were 15 and no longer children, it was the perfect time to brave the supposed ghosts that inhabited the house and see what the hype was for ourselves. So the three of us congregated in the field down the road from the Gothic Manor and entered Eel Creek Manor together. The interior was covered in a fine layer of dust and had the musty smell of mildew and the decaying stench of dead rodents who had entered the place and never found a way out. Every now and then, we came across the remnants of a prior investigation. Old cameras, a long-dead EMF reader, and even a few crucifixes occupied shelves and corners of some of the rooms around the place. Nothing happened for the first half hour or so of our search, but there was an odd feeling of being watched that picked at the back of my neck. "Oh shit," I heard Philip say, partly to himself. "Hey, Denny," he addressed me, "I think I found you a girlfriend." I stalked over to where my best friend of 12 years stood and studied what he was talking about. On a bookshelf containing a few volumes of old medical journals sat a framed image of a nude woman. It was hard to tell since the picture was in ancient black and white, but the woman, who I have to admit, did seem pretty attractive despite the wretchedness of her pose. I was 15, cut me slack, appeared to have blood running down her shoulders and between her breasts, flowing down to the hair between her legs. Atop her head sat what seemed to be a severed goat's head, its tongue sticking out the left side of its mouth. "Shut up, Phil," I said snidely. The kid always had a bit of a crass sense of humor. "Dude, I'm serious," Phil replied with a bit of a smirk crooked to the right side of his face. "She's got that weird freak kind of vibe to her." "You know it would be good." "Like you would know, King of Virgins," I shot back. "Both of you shut up," Daniel snapped in our ears. I didn't realize he was right there until he spoke. "Did either of you see that?" "See what, oh Danny boy?" Phil asked, following his question with a horrible singing voice of, the pipes are cajoling." Daniel poked Phil in the ribs hard, causing the kid to make a face and try to punch back, which Danny was able to sway away with minimal effort. "Phil, cut it. I'm serious. Did either of you see that?" I swallowed hard. Danny wasn't the type to joke around with this kind of stuff. "See what, Dan?" I asked. He stopped and swallowed. "I thought I saw that woman in the picture wink at me." Now, all three of us had had a certain interest in horror ever since we were 6 years old, staying up late in Phil's basement to watch late-night horror classics on TV during October and the occasional mid-year horror special. As we got older, we delved into Stephen King and Edgar Allan Poe, getting our hands on anything and everything we could that had something to do with ghost hauntings, demonic possessions, masked killers killing campers, or weird bloodthirsty cults. Despite a childhood of horror, Dan had always been the one to hide his face under the blankets first or stay up late in fear that whatever monster we had just seen on screen was coming after him. So, with the knowledge of his history, Phil and I didn't pay much attention to Dan's fright, even with the knowledge that he wasn't really one to joke us about it. "Probably just your imagination," Phil said. He tried to come up with a joke, but felt it better not to. "Yeah, Dan, this place is creepy. Some trick of the light must have just happened," I added. "Let's keep going." "I know what I saw," Danny chimed weakly. We continued on. Thump. Something knocked the ground behind us, causing everyone in the group to jump and turn around. Daniel let out a small shriek. "What the fuck was that?" Phil spoke harshly. "I don't want to be here anymore," Danny whimpered. I scanned the room, looking for a hit of what had made the sound when a light scratching noise started moving toward us. I braced my arm as Danny dove to the ground with his hands over his head, and Phil let out a high-pitched scream. Just as the sound was right in front of me, I saw the culprit. It was just a rat that had fallen through one of the holes in the ceiling and was scurrying to safety. I couldn't help but laugh. "Shut up, you ass-face," Phil growled at me when the rat had passed through a crack in the wall behind us. "You were scared too, I saw." "Yeah, but I didn't scream like a schoolgirl," I retorted through laughter, wiping tears away. "I didn't scream," Phil tried to argue. I stubbed my toe. "On what?" I asked snidely. "Air?" "Guys, can we go?" Danny asked with a shaking voice. I looked at my watch. It wasn't working. The battery must have died, I thought to myself, trying to remember when the last time I changed the batteries out on it was. "Yeah, we've been here long enough to brag that we explored the house. Let's head back to my place for a movie and pizza," I said. It was late October, so every channel would have a good selection of 1980s horror to choose from. "We haven't even seen the basement where all the occult stuff supposedly happened, though," Phil said. "Danny boy, don't be a chicken shit. Let's check it out for at least a bit before leaving." I wanted to further antagonize Phil for calling us chicken shits after screaming like a little girl, but instead, Danny and I reluctantly agreed to follow our friend down to the basement. The basement smelled like old incense and tobacco, with mold, stale alcohol, and something unidentifiable. It was a room of about 400 square feet with brick walls that were covered in spray-painted 660 SAXS pentagrams and cryptic messages, no doubt done by other high schoolers that had braved the basement before us. At the front of the room sat an old podium with an old candle, halfway melted down, and contained lewd images of sexual deviance carved into the wood. A wooden post with rusted metal shackles hanging off of it sat in the middle. "Man," Phil said, "imagine getting some with like 12 chicks at once down here." Paying no attention to Phil's perversions, I inspected the post. It was green with mildew in some spots, but others contained dark brown splotches. I assumed it was ancient dried blood. "So, this is where Abby McBride was supposedly found. I wonder how many people were sacrificed here in total," Danny said with a tremor. I could tell his skin was itching him to get out of the house. In all honesty, I was ready to let this place become a memory myself. Slam. We heard, causing all three of us to turn again. That was no rodent this time. Danny screamed. The temperature dropped. I could see my breath coming out as if I was exhaling smoke. The feeling of being watched went from a nag to push. My fingers instinctively went to the little wooden cross I wore around my neck. It had been a gift from my aunt when I got my first communion years ago. Ever since she had passed in a car accident 3 years ago, I couldn't bring myself to allow the trinket to sit in my drawer anymore. It was like a safety blanket I took everywhere with me. I asked loudly, but uncool, Who's there? I asked loudly, but uncool. Our flashlights went out as we heard a burst of wicked laughter happen behind us. No, please. A woman screamed to the right of us, don't make me. I don't want to. The laughter continued. No. No, a man screamed from the darkness to our right as we heard a ripping sound over the laughter. I want my mommy, a young girl with an Irish accent held in my ear, causing me to stumble back, bumping into Phil, who steadied me. A glowing green figure manifested before us, in front of the podium. Like what you see, the figure asked in an English accent. All around, in the same green glow, we witnessed an orgy happening. Maidens and men in Victorian-era clothing ripping the threads to rags. Pouring blood out of goblets onto their naked bodies, engaging in horrible acts to add to the sexual prowess. There was something revolting, yet oddly intriguing about it. I wanted to join but didn't know why. Ah, the figure at the front spoke. He had dark eyes with bags around them and neatly combed black hair. A small goatee encircled his tight mouth. His dining attire looked to be in the height of fashion for the time. He wore a weird gold medallion around his neck with a blood-red crystal in the middle. One of you wants to join the lovely ladies in this act of heathenism. The figure looked right at me. I'm surprised it was Mr. Dennis and not Mr. Philip who talks so much about having lost his virginity 2 years ago, but of course you are too afraid to even kiss a girl in fears of her thinking you're not enough down there, huh? The apparition of Mathers spoke. He turned to Danny. And you despicable excuse for a man, Mathers spat the words out, don't think I don't see that wet spot in your jeans. You pissed yourself like an infant. Your father won't be too pleased when he sees that, will he? Do you think he'll use the belt or his cane to lash your back when he sees? The spirit turned his attention back to us. Didn't you ever wonder why the fool was afraid of his own shadow? Why he never allowed you two to see him without a shirt on? The kid's father has ensured that his son will never live another day without his stamp of disapproval. He laughed wickedly again. Shut up. I screamed. You have no power over us. Oh, but I do, the specter said. The ghastly orgy continued around us. I know your darkest secrets. I know that you have a proclivity. More an obsession for sex. You hide it as best you can, but late at night in your room, you want it. It's okay. I was the same way. A young Catholic boy raised to be told that my impulses were a sin. Well, that all changed when I met Sister Cromwell when I was 14. And you, Philip, Phil jumped when he was addressed again. As I said, I know your little self-consciousness. Should we tell them about how you had the opportunity to kiss Sarah Pulsifer 3 months ago, but you shit your pants? And you, the pussy with the network of scars covering your back. You're just too easy. However, I can make it go away, boys. All you have to do is join them. The ghost snapped his fingers and 3 beautiful women, glowing, stood up from the orgy and invited us in. They could be all yours. Any woman of our little congregation is all yours. They will accept you with no hesitation. With shaking legs, Philip took a step. He marched slowly toward one of the standing women like a man to his execution. No! I screamed and pulled the kid by the collar of his shirt so hard that he slammed onto the ground. Get the fuck off of me, Dennis! Phil screamed. Mathers stood silently, watching us with an evil grin on his face. Danny stood quietly on the opposite side, crying and rubbing his back with his hands. Let me join them. I can't stand being a little bitch when it comes to girls anymore. He's just telling you things you want to hear. It's a trap, you fucking idiot. I shouted back at him. Cromwell interjected calmly. I will give you 3 all that you want. You could spend eternity here with us. fucking all of these women, even the men. If you want, don't listen to your friend, Philip. Phil tried to wrestle himself off of me to join the woman who was now begging him to enter her. Mathers began another fit of horrible laughter. It seemed to echo through my head as if he was screaming the laughter into a megaphone right beside my ear. I drove my elbow down hard into Phil's stomach, causing him to curl into a ball and gasp for breath. He swore at me sharply. I reached for the cross around my neck and held it up to Mathers. "You leave us alone right now, by the power of God," I howled. Mathers laughed even harder as if I had told him some joke. "Silly fool, that relic has no power here." "You are dash," he cut off. The little wooden cross began to glow and vibrate. I almost dropped it in fear when a pure white figure stood over me. It was my aunt. Not the middle-aged woman I remembered from my childhood, but a young woman with toned muscle. A warrior of a woman. "You will not take my nephew or his friends tonight, Mathers," my aunt spoke with a commanding voice, making even me cower as I remained on my knees over my friend. "Dennis, take your friends and leave. I will handle this swine, but I can't stay long." I attempted to protest before she yelled at me to go. I stood up and picked up Phil by the arm and latched onto the shirt of Danny before speed-walking to the stairs that lead to the exit of the basement. As we ascended the staircase, I watched as my aunt stormed toward Mathers at lightning speed. It caused a crescendo of sound as an explosion of light happened. A great fire started. "Go!" I heard my aunt yell once more from all around. The three of us gained some semblance of composure as the house caught fire and began to fall apart. Together, the three of us stormed through the vast hallways as burning chunks of wood fell from the upper floors and ceilings. We ran past ghostly figures taunting us and doors slamming on their own. I could feel a presence hot on our trail, chasing after us. My aunt told me inside my mind that we would be safe once we reached the outside. I took the lead and threw my shoulder into the door when Danny found that the handle wouldn't budge. I heard a loud crack as the great mahogany entrance gave way and shattered at the frame. We were outside into the cool October air under a silent moon. The only sounds were the cracks of the burning Gothic manor and crickets in the distance. We departed the property. I took one last glimpse at Ile Creole Manor, now completely engulfed in flames. I wasn't sure, but I could have sworn I saw Henry Mathers at the open doorway, smiling wickedly at me. "Turn around and keep going," my aunt's voice rang in my head. "I have to go back up, but you are safe now. Remember, I am always with you." The three of us trudged back to my place and silently cried until the sun came up. Though we would always love horror, the three of us would never read or watch anything about hauntings again. I used to be a veritable coffee addict, but it wasn't just the caffeine I craved. Each time I brought a fresh cup of Java near my face, my nose needed the rich roasted aroma, my tongue treasured the bitter tang, and my throat thanked the soothing warmth when I swallowed. Regrettably, let me tell you what caused me to change my mind and quit coffee cold. I had a mid-morning interview for a job downtown, so being a punctual person, I arrived over an hour early. Instead of waiting in the lobby, I took a seat in a local coffee shop down the street. First, I connected my computer to a hotspot and then went to the counter to order a cup of joe. The woman barista was strikingly handsome. Her long dark hair curled past her shoulders as an introduction to her slim and shapely form, but it was her inviting crimson lips that really drew my attention. "Sir, can I help you?" she beckoned. I looked at the menu on the wall behind her, pretending that I hadn't been gawking at her body, and asked, "It says you have some new autumnal flavors?" Her copious red lips smiled. Yes, sir, we have 3 new drinks. 2 of them are 100% vegan. They are Mandrake Mocha and Wolfsbane Vanilla. She pronounced Wolfsbane with a V. My face must have betrayed my confusion, so she asked, "Is there something wrong, sir?" Well, I answered, I guess I was expecting something like pumpkin spice or apple cinnamon. Her grin widened. I see. Well, we were trying something different this year. Something less November and more October, if you get what I'm saying. I shook my head. I don't really like mocha or vanilla. What was the third option? It's called Lifeblood Almond. It's a luxuriously nutty new twist on our popular Blackberry Merlot Red Eye. A Red Eye is a robust blend of coffee with espresso. It's quite potent. I hesitated. That's a strange name. And you said the other 2 were vegan. Why isn't this one? Tee-hee, she giggled. You've heard that some food dyes aren't exactly vegan. Well, we use some ingredients like that in order to tint the drink a deeper red than our traditional Blackberry Merlot. It's just for effect, and as for the name, it's all part of the novelty of the season. I guess I'd heard that some red dyes were made using crushed insects, and I was okay with it. Fine, I said, I'll try one of those. In short order, she handed me a big ceramic mug of the ruddy coffee and pointed to the counter where I could add spices, sugar, and cream to taste. I thanked her, skipped the modifications, and took the cup over to my seat by the window. I took one sip, and let me tell you, it was everything any true coffee lover could possibly desire. The fragrance was sweet and savory, while the flavor was nutty and fruity with a trace of asperity. I had only read and responded to one email before I realized my cup was empty. I looked at my watch. I still had plenty of time before my interview, so I took my mug to the counter for a refill. The comely barista took away my mug and handed me a clean one filled with her unique steamy brew. She didn't warn me that it was hot, but she warned me nonetheless. Be careful, sir. That's your 2nd cup of our Lifeblood blend. After 3 you'll be hopelessly addicted. Can an addict be more addicted? I laughed. We chuckled together and I returned to my computer. This time I became engrossed in some social media flame war, and when I again checked the time, I noticed that I only had about 10 minutes or so to walk down the 2 or 3 city blocks to my interview. I quickly stashed my computer into my briefcase and drained the last of my coffee. I left my mug on the table, reaching out for the front door, and then I heard the charming barista call out to me, "Sir? Would you like a cup for the road? It's on the house." Free coffee? I thought, I can't pass that up, but as I turned and approached the counter that 3rd time, a feeling came over me like I wasn't in control of my faculties. It was as if my arm was on a string like a wooden marionette when I accepted the paper cup with a plastic lid and raised it to my lips. While I performed this motion like an automaton, I noticed several other customers in the shop at the high counter and sitting at various booths, and all of them were staring at me as if in anticipation of something dreadfully exciting. Suddenly a rush of vertigo hit me like a tempest and I was free to act on my own. Instinctively I dropped the to-go cup on the floor of the shop and ran to the door, but to my chagrin I took one last glance back before my foot hit the sidewalk. Oh, how I wish that I hadn't, because the customers' faces revealed the filthy rot of the undead and every mouth was agape with vampire fangs. The voluptuous black-haired barista's now twisted smile also sported a pair of gleaming daggers between her blood-red lips, and she licked one of them with a glistening forked tongue. Needless to say, I ran faster than I had ever run in my entire life. I ducked into the building where I would soon have my interview, and breathing heavily, I peered out the glass door to see if I had been followed. Thank the stars that I didn't see any vampire spawn on the street. As I continued my lookout, a woman's voice came from behind me uttering the exact same words the barista banshee had asked me an hour before. "Sir, can I help you?" I turned around to see another quite attractive young woman sitting at a reception desk, but this time she was fair-haired and pale. I quit my reconnoitering so as not to look paranoid and straightened my tie. Perhaps I had an allergic reaction, or there was some kind of drug in that cursed coffee, I reasoned in an effort to calm myself as I approached her desk. As I got closer, I saw that she wore a plunging flowery yellow dress with a red silk scarf, and I was now thoroughly convinced that 1970s fashions were back in full force. I looked at my watch saying, "Ma'am, I have an interview in 5 minutes." She took my name and made a call to check if her manager was ready to see me. "Sir, he'll be down in about 5 or 10 minutes. If you'd like to take a seat in the lobby, there's coffee and donuts in there." I shook my head. No, I don't need any more coffee. In fact, I think I'll never drink it again after what happened to me this morning. She frowned. "That's sad, because we always buy the best premium blends for our guests and visitors. In fact, for the last week or so I've been getting my boss his favorite Lifeblood almond espresso from Nosferatu's coffee house down the street." When those words were uttered, my blood ran cold. Her boss drinks the stuff? I shivered as my mind raced. That's the very same man interviewing me. As this chilling notion rattled my brain, I noticed that the receptionist's silk scarf had fallen down from around her neck, plainly revealing 2 tiny perforations along her carotid artery. Once again I fled. During my protracted and dreadful flight, I couldn't help but see the many malevolent eyes of suspicious strangers glares on the streets, and on the subway, and even on the bus ride to my home in the suburbs. Obviously, I didn't get that job, nor did I ever again step foot in that accursed coffee house, but still more, I swore to the heavens that I would never again sip that seductively bitter witch's brew. It's evil. I can feel it. Feel it in every stone. Evil it is. What rubbish! A house, or any other building, cannot be evil. Men who transgress the laws of our good Lord are evil. Whether any such men, or indeed women, have ever resided in this house we shall not know, but if so, their wickedness cannot seep into its structure. You are a foolish child to believe it could be so. Mother. I turn away from my sullen daughter. Why she thinks such things I cannot imagine. She scowls at me. In a fit of temper she wrests the cap from her head and throws it to the stone floor. The flour from her hands as she casts it down form a dusty cloud in the air. It is illuminated by the low afternoon sun shining through the small window set in the thick stone wall of the kitchen. I tell you, Mother, it is something I know. I will no more bake today. This kitchen, that oven gaping like an open mouth, they make my flesh creep. When she is in this mood, there is no reasoning with her. When Henry and Peter return, perhaps they will cease her wild fantasies. She always listens to her father and brother more than she does to me. Oh well, I must finish the baking alone then, so there is fresh bread upon their return. The ride is long and they will surely be tired. Hopefully their trip to Winchester will have been worthwhile. As I knead the dough, my mind drifts to the earlier occupants of this house, the house that has only recently become our home thanks to the legacy from Henry's old aunt. Without this we could never have hoped to afford such a fine dwelling. Were the previous owners wealthy? I assume they must have had considerable funds, but how they were acquired or what became of them, who knows? I look around the kitchen which, despite Mary's fear, I find the most welcoming room. I can imagine families long since dead seated around the oak table eating by candlelight while basking in the heat from the fire and bread oven, much as we shall when the winter draws in. The table, I think, is old and perhaps belonged to those who rebuilt the house after the fire. It is a solid table which suits the room in which it sits. My bread is ready for the oven. As I push it inside, my arms appear to be drawn into it deeper than I would wish. I hurriedly let down the loaves from the iron and pull them away quickly. How strange, but perhaps not, as I have never used such an oven before. As the bread bakes, I look through the window and, against the sun that has sunk even lower, I see Henry and Peter riding towards our new home. I warm the milk and something stronger for Henry to greet them. Then, when they are rested, I will summon Mary. Perhaps her father will be able to quiet her unfounded fears. Mary. I hear horses. Yes, Father and Peter return. No doubt Mother will tell them of my outburst. Father takes notice of her, so will certainly brush off my concerns as nothing more than girlish pique. It is not that. I know it's not. Perhaps Peter will listen. Perhaps he has felt it too. I hope so. The feeling of doom I have is not merely that of a 16-year-old maid. This house burned down some 150 years ago. This was when witches were executed in our land. I wonder, was it set ablaze to rid the house of its evil? Were the witches real, or were those unfortunate enough to reside here turned to the dark side because Mother calls me, so I hurry to greet my father and brother. Father looks grim. Your mother tells me you have fanciful notions about our glorious new home. I will not tolerate such folly. We are privileged to be able to dwell in such a splendid house. I will have no more of your nonsense. No more Mary. Mother smiles at Father, satisfied with his response. Peter does not speak. He picks up the cat and fondles it. I am sure I am right and frightened of what may come to pass if we remain here. Mother. It was an accident, assuredly it was. I would have no reason to harm my own son. I turned suddenly and did not realize he stood so close. The knife pierced his coat but did no real damage to his person. He does not blame me, as he knows I would never harm him. He was fondling the cat again and was not aware of me holding the knife. When he dropped the cat, it turned and stared at me, its eyes wider than usual and its fur appearing to bristle. I have never been too fond of that cat. Henry knows it was an accident. Yes, an accident, an accident. Mary. I saw what happened. She didn't know I was there, standing in the doorway. Quietly standing, watching her. I feel I need to watch her. She has seemed strange lately, and I fear the house may be somehow taking hold of her. I pray it is not so, but nonetheless resolve to observe when I can. Peter was stroking Amber. He was standing just behind Mother as she prepared vegetables. He was not looking in her direction. Then, and I swear to the good Lord that it was not, despite her assertions, an accident, Mother stabbed at Peter. She stabbed at him and he cried out, dropping Amber. Mother was instantly contrite, but I saw, in the moment of the stabbing, it was her intent to hurt my brother. I knew not what to do and still am confused. Father believed her account, so all I can do is continue to watch. Mother. I must bake today. I must ready the oven for my loaves. Mary and Peter are busy tending to the horses whilst Henry is in the fields. I am alone in my kitchen, my realm. The oven grows hotter. Soon it will be ready for its work today. There is more work for it this day. Other than bread. Not just bread. Something else must be roasted today. After this perhaps I shall have some peace. There will not be accusing eyes watching me. Soon. Mary. Peter and I return from attending to our horses. Mother is in the kitchen, seemingly unaware of our presence. Baking, we suppose, but the smell is not of fresh bread. The smell is altogether different, burned meat. Peter looks at me, and as he speaks we see the awful truth of the situation. Where is Amber? Where is the cat?